Hello everybody, and welcome to week 3. This week we are looking at the instructional design process. And in this little mini lecture, I just wanted to go over in a practical way the typical elements that you look at. It's pretty much common sense, but let's go through them. So, step 1 is, what problem are you addressing? What skills or knowledge gaps are you hoping to address in your training? And next, who are you training? Who's the audience? What do they want or need to know? What is their current level of knowledge, skills, expertise in the particular area? Do they all have the same level? Is it mixed? Mixed levels are an interesting challenge, and if that's the case, you often have to provide multiple paths for learners who have varied skills and knowledge in a particular topic. What type of attitude are they likely to come in with? Are there any special challenges or constraints or considerations? For example, is there a high percentage of participants who have limited English proficiency? That completely changes how you would approach the content. How much time do you have? How much money do you have? What tools are available to you? And a really important question, how much time do the learners have? Several years ago, I managed a continuing education department at a college, and we did a lot of contract training for local companies. And over and over again, I'd see we would go in, no matter what the topic was, they would want the world, and I'd say something like, so you're looking at, about a 30-hour training, and they'd say, oh no, we can't possibly let the employees loose on this for more than 4 hours. So that's where the next step comes in handy. Really narrowing the scope, figuring out exactly what outcomes you want the learners to have at the end of the training, and those become your learning objectives. It's a great tool to share with stakeholders because I think that's a common situation that trainers see where people want everything, but they want it done in a minute. So I would often take the list of objectives and say, okay, well, we need to cut this in half. What would you like to go? And then we kind of have a back and forth because if certain objectives are predicated on others, it becomes a conversation back and forth. But the objectives are a great tool in that. Just a couple notes on objectives. These are really important to get right because everything else stems from that. It steers the ship. It keeps you in scope because especially if you're creative, you can really veer out into the weeds when you start down the instructional design path, and pretty soon you've fallen off the cliff in terms of learning objectives and sticking to them. So they map your route, and it's also, as I mentioned, a great way to communicate with stakeholders, and your assessments all stem from your learning objectives as well. I also think it's important to build in some kind of what's in it for me for the learners. Point out a benefit to the learner. Why should they be learning this? Then, of course, you want to develop engaging activities, make people feel upbeat, motivated. Something else that I want to put out there is something called a pull approach versus a push approach. Wherever possible, setting up circumstances where learners can pull the information out themselves, posing a problem and then giving them a set of resources and having them solve the problem as a way to process and absorb new content. It's often more labor intensive to do it that way, and depends, if you have a short course, it's easier to do than a 55-hour course. but definitely worth exploring whenever you're about to convey content, which I am sadly doing right now. Always ask, is there another way to come at it? Can the learners figure this out for themselves given the right resources? And then comes the step of, okay, you know where you're headed, you know your objectives, and then it's how to organize everything and how to sequence it and organize it into digestible chunks, and in a way that is cognitively digestible by learners. You may have seen there was an interesting article that came out very recently, like within the last 2 weeks, that mentioned that the boot camp approach really doesn't work. And I think a lot of us know this instinctively, but a new study showed that learners need what they called refreshing after about 20 minutes. 20 minutes is about how long people can focus on something. There was a famous study done of college students that really gives one pause in terms of lectures. The study showed that at any given moment in a college classroom, only 20% of the students were actually paying attention to the lecture. And then, of course, naturally, ensuring that the materials are pegged at the right level and that they're sequenced effectively. So a classic example would be in business writing. You start with, okay, here's a piece of writing. Identify the problems with it. Then the next step is, here's a piece of writing. Correct the problems. And finally, create your own piece of writing. And of course, you need to provide opportunities for interaction with the content and application of new skills and new knowledge. And this is not linear. You can start with application right from the beginning. You can pose a scenario and then give people the tools to solve a problem. And that can be the method of conveying the content. And finally, you need to figure out whether your training worked. Did learners like it? In your next course, you'll go into, well, actually your third course, you'll go into Kirkpatrick's 4 levels of evaluation in a lot of detail, so I won't go into detail here. But basically, I'll just mention the 4 levels. The first one is, did the participants like it? You know, the typical smile sheets. The second level is, well, did they actually learn? Third level is, were the participants able to apply the learning at work? And finally, the fourth level, was there an actual change in the organization or department? So let's go back to the micro level, developing skill or knowledge checks for each learning objective. You have a whole variety of tools at your disposal. It can be anything from responding to discussion questions to simulations, case studies, scenarios, games, projects, demonstrations, writing blogs, countless options. So, I just wanted to give you, as I mentioned, just a real practical overview of the design process. And I hope you continue to share your perspectives with each other. We have such a fantastic group. I'm just stunned by the variety and diversity of experience and some really insightful perspectives appearing on the discussion forums as well. All right, I will see you online.